I have seen that a majority of spiritual seekers are unhappy in life. In fact, many tell me that they were quite okay with life as it was proceeding when there was no awakening and they were completely caught up in the world. But as the awakening happened and seeking began, they felt more unhappy, they felt more pain and suffering. So, what's the whole point of seeking? And this is precisely where this understanding tackles that question, like, what is the point of seeking if seeking is making me more and more miserable, if it is not bringing happiness in my daily living? So, Ramesh questions it like this. He says, who seeks what? First of all, who is the seeker? Where is the seeker? Isn't seeker a conditioned entity that is completely identified with an outcome? And the outcome usually is attainment of a permanent state of bliss, which is basically an imagination of mind, because there is no permanent bliss in reality. But he says that once when the seeker realizes that there is no permanent state of bliss or happiness that can be sustained for eternity, that itself brings peace in daily living. Because that completely destroys the spiritual dilemma, the spiritual conflict that one is facing in daily living. But when one is completely identified as a seeker and thinks that he or she is seeking something that one does not already have, that search, that seeking itself becomes pain and misery. I will read Ramesh Balsekar's words to clarify this more. He says, who seeks what? What is the ego and what is the ego seeking? The ego wants self-realization, and the ego can only be satisfied with something that can be understood and appreciated in this life. Self-realization is simply the realization by the ego that the ego itself is not a separate doer, that the doing is merely a happening through the human mechanism or instrument. This understanding annihilates the guilt and shame, pride and arrogance that accompany the sense of personal doership. The result is an enormous sense of freedom, of peace and harmony. So living with a sense of peace and harmony is very different from the conditioned idea that peace has to be attained through achievement of some outcome. If I say that I will only be peaceful when the sky is blue, I will never be peaceful because grey skies will always happen. If I put a condition that I will be happy and peaceful when all my relationships are harmonious, I will never be happy, because life's flow is not designed in that way. It is not designed to be harmonious all the time. All relationships at all points have conflicts. There is no relationship, even the closest ones, that are harmonious all the time. Because if that was true, then there would be no need of spirituality, no need of any contemplation or self-inquiry. Because relationships are the basis of life and living. So, this understanding that no one is the doer, the ego having realized its illusory nature, gives up the sense of personal doership. This is the crux of this message. And if this is understood, it becomes apparent that I did not do anything. I did not create any hurt. The hurt happened. It is not avoiding responsibility because one completely accepts the consequences that has happened through this mind body organism. Let's say if a hurt is caused to someone through my action, I completely accept the consequences of that. But at the same time, I do not create any guilt or resentment towards either myself or that person, because I know that it was the destiny of this mind body organism to say something which caused hurt in another mind body organism, and getting hurt in the other mind body organism was destiny of that particular mind body organism. But in reality, no one said anything and no one got hurt, and no consequences happened to a person, but the consequences did happen. And the law of causality, karma, is taking place right now. So it is not about escaping responsibility, it is not about bypassing anything. One can obviously apologize for the action that are perceived as one's doing. But one does not carry any guilt or shame around it, because the guilt and shame just perpetuates the sense of separate self or the ego. A natural sense of guilt may arise, which is not bad, but it does not continues in horizontal time as a belief that I did something wrong. Therefore, the seeker trying to seek something in order to getting rid of all the feelings and emotions and thoughts is not going to work, because that comes from personal doership, that I am doing something to attain a state that will completely absolve me from all my past doings and actions. No, the consequences of actions are going to happen. But here's the thing, whatever consequences happen are accepted. They are not challenged, they are not resisted. No feelings, no emotion is ever resisted. And the life's flow is accepted the way it is without any modification, any alteration. And that brings peace and harmony. It is not that the peace is to be acquired externally. The peace is one's own true nature. It is readily accessible here and now. So this concept that one is not the doer brings one to that place of centeredness, to that place of peace, which is the substratum which is never lost. And that is the concept in a nutshell. Once the seeker understands this, the seeking drops. And the ending of seeking is the ending of suffering. Therefore, remember that if the seeking is happening, let it happen, but do not assume that it is your destiny to seek forever. The seeking may end at any point when it is God's will, when it is the cosmic law in execution, and it decides that it has to end, it will end. And one will experience peace and harmony. And that peace, that is what one longs for, even when one is, let's say, relatively unawakened, or if you want to use any other term, before the understanding happens and one is completely absorbed in materialistic worldly life. That is the peace that one deep within their mind long for. And one is willing to give up all comforts. One is willing to undertake all suffering for that truth. I have seen so many people give up so many comforts. Let's take Buddha, for example. He gave up all comfort for the sake of truth. What did he not have? Beautiful women, all the wealth in the world, all the power in the world. But he gave it up all for truth. We cannot resist that. And we will. And a seeker will embrace all suffering for the sake of truth. That's why a seeker's life indeed is a little bit painful. But that pain does not have to become suffering, an endless suffering. The moments of suffering, moments of pain will happen. There's no avoiding that. But it does not become a constant suffering. It is only the separate self, the ego, which constantly suffers as this happened to me, that happened to me, I did not attain this, I did not attain that. Continuously wanting to grab hold of some permanent state or some permanent realization that can solve the ego's problems, what ego perceives as the problems. Why am I fundamentally unhappy? What is the reason for my unhappiness? Ultimately, it is the realization that the unhappiness is basically a sensation in the body. It is only the mind that gives it a meaning, that it is unhappiness, that it is depression, that it is suffering, or whatever it wants to label it. But at the bare root of it, it is pure sensation, which is made up of love. Even to be able to experience it, you need love. And that love is peace, which is our true nature, and it is not to be found through seeking, but it is discovered when the seeking drops.